So the next principle is reality is negotiable. I first heard about this. I was reading a book about, it might have been engineering students at MIT, and the story was, I probably am not getting the details correct, but the gist of it was they told these engineering students, imagine here's a brick and I want you to come up with as many uses as you can for it. So they came up with a half a dozen or something. Well, it could be a paperweight or a doorstop, or you could hit somebody in the head with it or something, but it was pretty limited. Then they said then they went to another group. They went to the art department or someplace. Maybe it wasn't MIT, maybe it was somewhere else, but they went to the art department and they asked the artistic guys, the creatives, they asked them, and they came up with all manner of uses. I mean, creative uses, things you never would think that a brick could be used for. Now, what was interesting was when they went back to the engineering students and they said, pretend that you're a creative person. Pretend that you're an artist. You're no longer an engineer, but you are now an artist. How many uses for the brick? And guess what they did? They thought of all kinds of way more creative, because their reality was negotiated. When they saw themselves as an engineer, there's a prescribed behavior and a prescribed worldview that's how you do things and that's how you think when you're an engineer. When you're a creative person, you're free. You can come up with all kinds of ideas. What was interesting was that they were the same person. It was just a matter of changing their perspective. So you can do this in your life. You can negotiate your own reality. It's the label that you give yourself. It's the label everybody else gives you. What you're expected to, what you're not. Nobody expected me to go on and get a doctorate in anything, and then to end up with 2 doctorates and a postdoctorate was pretty much unthinkable. And the only way that happened was because I started to change my perception of myself. I started to think about myself a little differently. A lot of it was because of the martial arts exposure and my early training with Jay D'Amato and Steve Yant and all those guys. But there were a lot of other people as well. Now, the interesting thing in the martial arts world was if you get a belt promotion, if you're promoted up and you get a rank, I used to notice that when people would get a promotion, they started acting differently. A lot of times their grappling improved. The way they carried themselves changed because they started to act and carry themselves in accordance with what that belt said they were. That's a tricky little thing, because if you're promoted legitimately, really in a legit school, you're not looking for the belt rank. You're not pursuing the belt rank at all. You're working on your skill set, and when it's apparent to the instructor, if the instructor is a legit person, they're going to award you that belt rank in recognition of it. And it says, look, I understand where you're at, and I want you to understand it. I want you to realize where you're at. So if you're stuck in your life and you're thinking, well, I'm not a creative person, or I'm not this, or I'm no good at that, or I can't stand up in front of anybody, or whatever your limitation is, fake it till you make it. Pretend you're somebody else. Pretend that you're somebody completely different. And the interesting thing neurologically is the brain can't discern that. The brain doesn't understand that you're thinking about it and pretending it's happening versus doing it. It doesn't have the ability to discern that, so you literally become it. So the idea of fake it till you make it is a profound statement. Now, I'm not talking about being illegitimately cocky or arrogant. I'm not talking about believing in something that is just nonsense, And everybody has different strengths and talents. So if your strength or talent isn't in, say, art or whatever, it doesn't mean you can't do art. It doesn't mean you can't. But you don't want to fool yourself either. You don't want to tell yourself, well, I'm the greatest singer who's ever lived. And then it come to find out you're the only one who thinks it. Now, that's fine as long as you're not looking for external validation. But as soon as you start looking for the world to validate you, you're going to run into a big problem. Think about a thing in your life that you're struggling with, or some self-limiting belief that you have, something that you're doubting yourself about, and then just pretend that you're somebody else. What would that look like if you weren't that person? What would it look like if you were a fabulously talented individual? I learned this early on I can remember certain guys that I knew who they weren't by anybody's, probably almost, except for maybe their mother, wouldn't say they were a good-looking guy. You wouldn't think that. But they were amazingly successful with women sometimes. They had a magnetic personality, the way they carried themselves. They had confidence. That was an amazing thing to see. And then I've seen other people who had all the talent and everything in the world, and they were filled with self-doubt, and no matter what they did, they couldn't make it in the world. They just couldn't break through. Well, reality is negotiable. You negotiate your reality. So think about that. Find out the areas that you're struggling with, and just play with that idea a little bit. What would it be? Suppose you weren't the engineer. Suppose you were the creative guy. How many things would be possible for you?